John Browning calling into the workshop. Hello.
He said it is. He said,
You know,
he said we're live.
I didn't say hello.
Yeah.
Shouldn't be
He
live.
said we live. We started early.
No, we don't.
Why is he saying that?
I don't know. Mr. Browning, this is Kevin Christian. Can you hear me?
Don't go live early.
Yes, I have you, Kevin.
All right, good morning. Just hang on a second. The meeting will start momentarily.
Yes, sir.
Well, he said we shouldn't be live.
The school board work session begins in 1 minute. Please take your seats. Again, the school board work session begins in 1 minute.
Good Thursday morning, everyone. I now call the November 4th, 2021 Administrative Briefing and Work Session of the Marion County School Board to order at 9 a.m. We are the Marion County School District Leadership Team. When we come together to work, we are efficient, effective, and productive. Our three most important characteristics are dedicated, transparent, and individually responsible. To work well together, we must demonstrate respect, confront reality, and be accountable. We will always put students first, and we will leave a legacy of success. Please silence your electronic devices or put them on vibrate to avoid disturbing others. At this time, I would like to ask Board Member Cummings to please lead us in a prayer and remembrance for the life of our student, Josiah Williams, who was tragically lost to us yesterday morning.
Let's pray. Merciful Father in heaven, in the mighty name of Jesus, we come to this morning, Lord God, petitioning your throne of grace and mercy today on behalf of this family, Lord God, on behalf of his mother and his grandparents, God. We ask that you would just send your angels of comfort to them, that you would station them around them, Lord God, reassuring them that you're still in control. We pray, God, that peace will come out of this situation and that healing would come as well. We pray, God, for the drivers of the other vehicles, of the bus drivers and all those that witnessed this tragedy. And God, we know that you're in control, and we don't understand everything that always happens, but we trust that you are our Savior and that you're going to make everything all right. So God, touch this family right now, touch this mother in the passing of her only son, and keep her in the days ahead. And we give it all to you today in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Board Member Reverend Cummings. I will now ask the school board attorney to explain the rules for this work session.
This work session is a public meeting as defined in Florida's Sunshine Law. The board is dedicated to full transparency in its meetings and its work. In compliance with the Sunshine Law, the board has adopted uniform meeting procedures, including the right for citizens to participate. The board will allow public comment regarding any work session item listed on today's agenda at the appropriate time. Speakers must fill out a request form and hand it to the school board secretary. After the board and superintendent have completed their discussion on a particular agenda item, the secretary will call speakers' names in the order received. At the podium, speakers are asked to state their full name and address and to spell their last names. Each speaker will have 3 minutes. As required by the Sunshine Law, the board must maintain orderly conduct and proper decorum throughout this meeting. Speakers may criticize subject matter and decisions in a respectful manner, but not people. Finally, speakers must be very careful not to violate the privacy rights of others, including students and their family members, by mentioning their names or other identifying information. Thank you for your attention to these important rules.
Thank you, Attorney Powers. We will now begin the work session with the superintendent's administrative briefing. Good morning, Dr. Gullett.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. My only briefing is also just to say how deeply we feel the loss of Josiah yesterday. I want to thank our team who did a phenomenal job of being out there. I met with the crisis team out at the school yesterday even and just thank them. But everyone, Mr. Christian and Mr. McFadden, everybody who worked so hard to rally around the school, family. I want to thank our first responders. Sheriff reached out to me personally. I talked to him twice yesterday. So our community really came together in a moment of tragedy. And I just want to say thank you. Very, very difficult time. Principal, too, I want to make sure to recognize her. Did a fantastic job. I want to urge, I think it's an opportunity to urge our community, please be aware, it's dark in the morning when our students are coming to school. Please take due diligence and care and understand that we have children out there. I went through a bus zone the other day, a zone outside of a school, speeding cars, and tried to get some license plate numbers, but please take good care, whether it's out in our rural areas or in our city. Our children are sacred to us. So we want to ask that all of us are mindful, put the phones down, pay attention to what we're doing, because we don't want to suffer another tragedy. So just urge for everyone to be safe and mindful of our children. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Gullett, and I know the whole board concurs with your statements and your gratitude to our staff and to our first responders. It's a very sobering time, but we will move forward and keep Josiah in our hearts. And does that conclude your briefing?
It does. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, we will move on to board member residence areas, and we are honored today to have our Supervisor of Elections, Wesley Wilcox, with us this morning. Good morning.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members, Superintendent. Thank you very much for inviting me and giving me the opportunity to speak concerning redistricting a little bit. And just be honest, I haven't been to a work session in a number of years, so I really don't know the protocol here, but hopefully there's question and answer and that kind of stuff, and we'll just deal with it. Let me talk about just some generalities of redistricting. As hopefully you know, our U.S. Census Bureau is required to take account of all persons in our state and our communities and everything else in years that end with a 0, and report that number officially as of April 1st of that year. So the official date is April 1st of 2020. The Census Bureau, due to a number of factors, mainly COVID related, were extremely delayed in their release of the data from those. Historically, the release of the data has been about 1 year after that April 1st date, so right around the spring of a year that ends with a 1. I believe their official release date for this data this time was at the end of September. So really the data has just been out for about a month and a half. From that, state legislatures are required to do a redistricting process for the legislative houses, the Florida House, the Florida Senate, as well as the congressional delegation in the state of Florida. Furthermore, getting to the topic at hand, school boards are also allowed to do redistricting during that time. And the Florida statute that covers redistricting as it relates to school boards is 1001.36, very specifically paragraph 2, and I'll leave this document with Jeremy if he wants it, if you've not referenced that. And it basically states, not basically, verbatim states, any district school board may make any changes that it deems necessary in the boundaries of any district school board member residence area at any meeting of the district school board, provided that such changes shall be made only in odd-numbered years and that no change would affect the residence qualifications of any incumbent member shall disqualify such incumbent member during the term for which he or she is elected. Therefore, if you follow statute, if you're going to do redistricting of your 5 districts and you want to do it fairly soon, that means it must be complete by December 31st of this year. If not, then your next opportunity will be in the year of 2023. The kind of thought process behind redistricting and where we are now is, I believe the last time it was done was around 2011, and it references some precinct numbers, some other stuff that literally are no longer in existence. And so that's kind of where we are. Let me tell you a little bit about my process. In the spring of 22, hopefully fairly early, but the reality is probably around the April to May timeframe, the legislature will give me the new congressional Senate and House boundaries, and at that point in time, I will then make changes to all of my precincts that may be necessary. One of the other things that I will do during that time is I will change precinct numbers. I do it for a very specific reason. I leave the municipalities alone. So City of Ocala, like we're doing right now, is still going to be 1 through 19-ish. May go up or down 1 or 2 numbers. But the quadrant system that we have in Marion County, meaning precincts in the northeast section of the county, I'll begin with a 1, northwest a 2, so on and so forth. Currently, they're in the 1500s, 1510, 1520. When I do this redistricting, I will completely change that numbering scheme and go to 1,000, 1,010, 1,020. And I do that for a voter reason that if somebody asks me about a precinct, they give me a number, I know which version they're talking about. And there's no confusion if they're asking me about a precinct or if they're asking a candidate or anything else. If they give you an old precinct number, you know it's an old precinct number. And it gives you that opportunity. So, moving back to your task at hand, if you take the official population of Marion County, which is 375,908, your ideal district population is 75,182. That's just straight math. You take the big number, divide it by the 5 districts, bam, there's your ideal population. The courts have ruled that you can have a deviation in the ideal population. You can either go up 5% or go down 5%. And so that 5% number is 18,795. So your range of district populations can be anywhere between 56,000-ish and 75,000. So, and remember, when you do these ranges and you're counting population, it's complete heartbeats in there. It's just not registered voters or any other measurement or students or any of that. It's just straight heartbeats. How many people do you have living in that district? And all of that information is available from the Census Bureau. The GIS people amongst your crew will know there's something called a census block, and we non-GIS can kind of think of a census block as kind of a city block or something like that, and it gives all the population for that particular block on it. And so you just start taking those blocks and building them up until you get fairly close to your ideal populations. And I'll leave it there and open it up for any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Wilcox. Board?
So, Mr. Wilcox, I know you and I have talked about this a little bit. I look on our school board website, and our last resolution that the school board adopted was in 2015 that has the inaccurate precincts. At this juncture, do you believe it'd be possible for us to at least make that modification so we can have a document on our website that's accurate leading into the upcoming elections? We can align our precincts with what your precincts actually are?
If you have the opportunity to, time frame wise, I don't know what your legal requirements would be as it relates to notifications and those type of things, getting them in there. It behooves you to at least be accurate at some point. I see because as you all know, we move into 2022. The normal, this is a normal 60% of the board up for reelection. Obviously, we have one seat that is for the unexpired term. Therefore, you're going to have 80% of the board up for election. The precincts, you could get them right, get back in line with me, and that would actually probably hold until May, and we would be accurate. And we would be in sync, and at least, during campaign season, all the other stuff, as you're thinking through this and do those parts, you would be accurate. Once we go official with the new lines, obviously the accuracy is going to go away again. And then I hope we come back again in 23 and put those back. I'm a firm believer in accuracy. And even if I know that, in a short period of time, I'm going to be inaccurate, I think at least trying to get as close to accuracy as possible always behooves any sort of agency as you move forward. Personal opinion.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, board, I know we're not necessarily, you might have additional questions, but it sounds to me like it would be possible, potentially, with staff's help and Mr. Wilcox's help, for us to at least get something, maybe in the next 6 to 8 weeks before we're at December 31st, that does align with his current precinct numbers. Some of these locations in this 2015 document are no longer precinct locations at all, churches and different things that he doesn't use any longer. So if we could at least get it to align somewhat, and then possibly ask Ms. Prestopino to ensure that maybe January 2023, that we revisit this as soon as possible and not wait to November of the odd numbered year. And that's my fault. I know I brought it up in January, but we didn't have any idea at that point whenever you were going to get the information.
Right. You brought it up, but the official release of the data wasn't until September. Right. Typically it's in the spring, and we have 8, 9 months. This time we have 3.5,
Right.
3.
Right.
So
I don't know what your
Board?
thoughts are, but.
I agree. Our precincts, are you talking about changing just what's on our website or whatever, the precinct numbers? I agree, that should be accurate. But I think that should just always be done accordingly. Like anytime there's a change, I'm not sure why this had.
you're legally only allowed to change your lines.
Oh, and I'm not
Odd
talking about
numbered year.
changing lines. I
Right.
thought you said precinct, like the.
Numbers.
Right, it has to be done
Numbers.
by resolution. So there was a resolution in 2015 that this school board adopted, Resolution 1504, and that's where we align our precincts with his.
That resolution, to my memory, and I don't have it in front of me, and it was a number of years ago. I believe it went through the process of, District 1 contains these precincts and those type of things. Well, those precincts don't exist
I see
anymore.
what you're saying. So the precincts don't exist.
Correct.
But-
And
But
additionally,
by law, do we have to change our district according to so are we not following the law right now?
you're accurate with the law.
Oh, well then.
You're legally correct.
Okay.
But if you go read the resolution and it says, District 1 contains precinct 1,000, there is no precinct 1,000.
Okay, so we need to align those precincts to so we can leave our districts the same, but
You
we
could.
need to align those precincts. I get it, I understand.
You could do it like that, in possibly a better actual definition of this as you move through is define your district off of what's called a census block. That's a legal area. It's recognized as a unique area. A census block is identified, it's got like a 15-digit identifier, and it's 12083 and a string of, I can't remember, 6 or 10 numbers. 12 means it's state of Florida, 083 means it's Marion County, and then it's got this other number. So you could come back with your districts and identify them. District 1, because the way I identify precincts to the Secretary of State's office is I use census blocks. And then anybody who has the geography can take those census blocks and build the map, right? Because it's a commonly referred to document. So that may be the better way to go, unless you've got some sort of legal requirement that says you have to list precincts, which I don't think you do. I would go with the census block and just identify that.
I was just about to say that because I'm wondering how many people reference our website to find out what precinct they're in. And I say that because that falls more into the realm of the supervisor of elections.
Exactly.
Which I defer to, in situations like this, because you guys are the experts. I love the idea of aligning our districts with the census block, because the more consistency we can have, I think the better it is for everyone. I'm kind of uncomfortable with the idea of keeping those precinct numbers up on the website if they don't need to be there in the short term. I say let's just take them off, and because to try to get all of this straightened out to then not even have it be accurate again
Right.
after December 31st,
And if you
we
do
have enough to do.
Right, and if you do census blocks only change once every decade.
Right.
And you're fine. They will always, during that
Yes, and
decade.
again, there's that alignment piece.
And census blocks jurisdiction can't really split a census block. If I split a precinct across a census block, it's a very lengthy process. So I did not split a census block in 2012 nor 16 when we had to do some redistricting, and I have no plans on doing that in 2022 when we do it. The Congress, Senate, and House are not allowed to split census blocks, and therefore if they're not going to, that's what drives my precincting. I'm not going to split them either. So you identify those, as you mentioned, a voter typically doesn't come at you with, okay, is my precinct in there? They're looking for some other definer, is my school in
District.
there?
They look at
Exactly.
district, they say, I'm
Right.
not in your district.
Right, exactly, yeah.
Right. So I fully agree. I want to get what's on it, and this has been on our website,
Right.
obviously, for a really long time. Like, I just want us to have accurate information there. If you go to our school board page, it has all of our pictures, and then right below the pictures, it has this resolution link.
Right.
In addition to the map. So I just want us to get that cleaned up, and if we don't need it, I'm totally fine with that.
So it doesn't change the boundaries of our district.
It doesn't need to. You have the opportunity to do it. The other thing that you need to be aware of,
In odd-numbered years.
in odd-numbered
Right,
years,
conceivably,
right.
could we get it
Right.
done in the
You
next
c-
6 weeks?
And I don't know that you could. I just don't know.
Right.
The other thing that's driving this, it's not only accuracy, you need to look at your ideal populations. You know, if your districts, even though we recognize everybody's elected at large, it's still, there's a court type of thing of, is your district in an acceptable range? And by district, I mean your population of your district is in an acceptable range. I don't know that number.
6,000 to 75,000.
Right, you need to know that. If you guys are excuse my terminology, if the board districts are outside of those ranges, you need to be aware of that. The court systems typically don't look lightly upon that, even though we know we're elected at, or you are elected at large. They still want the district representation to be, you know, the thing is one person, one vote.
As equitable as possible.
Exactly. So you need to know those numbers. I don't know your numbers.
I think Mr. Hurley, he may have been looking at those numbers.
Right.
I don't know what they are either, but I think he was looking into that, but.
As a board, it sounds like it would be important for us to know those numbers. So are we in consensus to ask that question of Mr. Hurley and get that information while we're working to tidy this up?
Now, where I'm at is, if we're gonna do this now and then have to come back again, we're adding more stress to our district. To do this now for 6 weeks and then it's gonna be out of whack again in a possible few months.
If you change to the definition of your district to census blocks, you won't go out of date.
We already have that information.
Right, you already have that information. You won't go out of date because those census blocks will be effective for a decade. If you attempt to identify based off of my precinct, you will go out of date in May.
Okay.
So do we have to, again, we can just get the precincts number off our, that seems like that's the easiest thing.
First thing,
Right.
get that off.
Yeah.
Seems like the easiest thing.
First, let's get the precinct numbers off. I believe we have consensus for that. Are you with us, Board Member Browning, on this?
Yes, I am. I have a question for Mr. Wilcox. Well, would you say, and first of all, thank you for coming and helping with these issues. It's going to become incredibly important during election time. Would you say, in blanket terms, that we are statutorily and legally in compliance as we move into the next election? That's because we're bandering around terms such as out of whack and things like that, and that makes me very uncomfortable in terms of potential candidates coming in and filing with you in terms of location within a district.
Let me summarize the question, Don. The question as I understood was, do I think you're currently with your district definition legal? Is that accurate?
That is, yes, that's correct. Are we currently legal, and would we be able to handle challenges? And I know you can't look out and understand every challenge, but in general terms, would we be legal now, and would we be legal in 2022 in terms of this conversation?
The driver on that, Don, is actually, you know, I believe you to be legal as of your last redistricting. And that's still in effect. Therefore, by essence of that, I think you would still technically be there. The challenge that you face is district populations. I don't know that number. If the numbers if you've shown either exponential growth or declination in a particular district, that could put you outside the ideal range, which is a plus or minus of 20%, plus or minus 5% off of the 20. And so you as the board need to determine what is the current population of each of the districts. If you fall into the court acceptable range, then you could carry forth with your district lines as they currently are. If after analysis, you know, you've got one district that's at 110,000 population, and the other one is at 40,000. Those two districts are out of compliance as the court sees it, being the plus or minus 5%. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. And we would go through your office to verify those numbers.
No, sir. No, sir. This is off of what's called a census block data, which is a publicly available data. That's the same data the Florida legislature uses. You literally go, and your folks have done this in the past, where they go to the Census Bureau, you get the data for Marion County, and there are literally 300,000 census blocks. They take all of that, and that defines, from a GIS perspective, that defines your jurisdiction, and then you take all those census blocks, start from a known where you are, as it would be my recommendation. You could throw what you got now out the door and just start all over if that be the case. I would not recommend that. But you can take what you have now, determine populations, and then start making adjustments to ensure that you're in the plus or minus 5%.
Okay, thank you. Madam Chair, I would suggest that perhaps we have our attorney look at those numbers and follow the steps necessary to verify those numbers so that we are then in compliance, and there is no question. Does that make sense, fellow board members?
Thank you, Board Member Browning. Yes, I would like to propose that we have consensus to remove the precincts that are inaccurate off of our website, sooner the better. And then next step for Dr. Gullett to please direct appropriate staff to look into our population to ensure that we're within range, and then bring that back to us so that we can further problem solve.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
question. Do we need precincts on our website at all?
That's what I just asked, to remove them.
Just remove
Yes.
all precincts? Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
That
I thought you said remove the inaccurate ones.
No, because remove them all.
All,
because
okay.
The
it's
resolution
inaccurate.
just doesn't need to be on our website.
Right.
And
Madam Chair,
I concur. I just happened to pull up Marion County 2010 census data, so we were at 331,000. So 40+ thousand people have gone somewhere. So we just need to figure out if they all congregated into one district, then we may be out of compliance.
Right, and that's conjecture at this point. I
Right,
think we need to
absolutely.
have the professionals review it.
Please.
And Dr. Gullett, I know that's something you'll take forward for us at our request, and we
Certainly
appreciate
will.
it.
Thank you.
Okay. Is there
Madam
anything
Chair?
else? Yes, sir?
Yes. Could we have Jeremy weigh in on this, because it's in removing numbers, the general population relies on those numbers. I think, if at least for what we have right now to rely on, if you're going to go over to Mr. Wilcox's office and file to run in the upcoming election, in the next election. So it would seem to me that it would be utter confusion not to have those numbers on the website. And so that you would know immediately who you were challenging and who you were representing in the next election. So if we could, if I could just have our attorney weigh in on that issue, because it would seem to me just the simple fact of taking those numbers down could add just almost an impossibility of relying, as we all rely upon, to know that we do reside within the district that we represent.
I've actually communicated with staff and with Mr. Wilcox regarding this, and actually I think Mr. Wilcox can explain further about that particular issue. But in looking at what staff has provided me so far, I don't think that as far as first of all, you're talking about numbers. I think you're talking about precinct numbers. As to the precinct numbers, those are something which those numbers do change. As Mr. Wilcox indicated, we essentially people are elected at large. It doesn't matter really where. If you're going to vote, it doesn't really matter. You get to vote for any school board member who is on the ballot. It's not that you have to be within a certain area. So that's not going to be confusing or difficult. And from the staff numbers that I've gotten as far as population changes so far, I believe that the data that we've got, I need to verify this with staff. We didn't have any district in which there was a variation in population data from the census that exceeded I think one was right around 2%. So it's not ultimately going to be a problem as to those numbers either. But I would defer to Mr. Wilcox to probably be able to explain if he feels comfortable.
Yes.
Yes, I'm referring mostly to the.
Mr. Wilcox.
Thank you. Let me explain to you my thought process on creating precincts. In 2022, I will designate new precinct lines solely based upon some physicalities and those items. But if I'm looking at districts, the 3 district types that I look at are congressional, state senate, and state house. With all due respect, school board districts do not alter my precinct lines. Therefore, there will be a precinct that half of it is in District 2, half of it is in District 4. I'll have another one that's divided in 4 different school board districts because of the election at large. It does not affect my voters. Therefore, those don't play into my decision-making process. So whatever number you do today will be wrong in May, unless you come back with some other nomenclature, some other naming convention, such as census blocks, which would be my recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Wilcox. And
Yes,
we did
Madam
already
Chair,
have the conversation about districts, and that leads to the greatest voter confusion. They think because they don't live in District 4 for school board that they can't vote for the candidate in District 4 or District 2. So I think that we're going to go ahead and move forward now. I really appreciate everyone's time.
Madam Chair.
It sounds like we have a good plan. Just to reiterate, we'll go ahead and remove the precinct numbers, and that is just fine to do, correct, Attorney Powers?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And then Dr. Gullett, on the operational side, will direct staff as far as the census questions and making sure that we're in compliance with the ideal population and within range.
Certainly, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Wilcox.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Always great to see
Board
you.
members, thank you much. Have a great afternoon.
Is there any public comment?
Madam Chair.
Yes, sir.
Yes. Would you make clear that we are not going to change district numbers so that all board members will know whether or not they do reside in their districts, and would the districts be changing? That's an element that perhaps could be a confusion.
Thank you, sir. Yes, and that has not been discussed as part of this at all, and there's no intention to change district numbers at this time, so the community can be reassured about that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for making that clear. Thank you.
All right. We'll see no public comment. We'll go ahead and move on to Howard Academy Community Center updates. And we'll start with Ms. Devick. No, we will start with Dr. Reese. Good morning, ma'am. How are you?
Good morning, Madam Chair, board members, Dr. Gullett, Attorney Powers, Nicole, and Nicole. So good morning, everyone. So we are, Mrs. Devitt and I, where's my sidekick? She's going to sit down for a moment. We're here this morning to provide an update with Howard Academy. community centers. So on September 9th, there was a meeting with the community committee advisory and the school board, and they shared some information about the community center, and so we are here to provide an update from that meeting. So since that meeting, we have met with Dr. Brooks and Mrs. Velez, and the partnership has now evolved. So we will resume our activities at the center in January with the hiring of a program manager, and our tentative date for that program manager is set for January, beginning of January, upon our return back from winter break. We will have an interview panel that consists of members from the Community Advisory Committee, the district, and school. During our collaborative conversations, we will partner with the Community Home Project. They are offering many activities that we already had currently in place prior to the closing for COVID and construction at Howard Academy. These life skills, education, and fundamental services will enhance the self-sufficiency in the community. Before getting into our timeline of those events, I would like to mention on November 16th, we will have a soft opening of our Black History Museum. Scott Mitchell was instrumental with helping organizing with the artifacts and getting them back and ready for the opening. Our timeline for the center to resume to full capacity will be as follows, and Mrs. Devitt will join to kind of share that information.
Thank you. Good morning, Ms. Debick.
Good morning. Good morning, board. Good morning, superintendent. As Dr. Reese mentioned, we have had numerous meetings and conversations and collaborative discussions about what we can do to reopen the services at Howard Academy. Beginning in January, with the help of the Community Home Project, which is an initiative funded by the hospital district, these are some of the items that we would like to bring back. We would like to build a foundation of fitness and nutrition, starting with gardening classes. The West Ocala Community Garden is in that area, so getting fresh produce and fruits and vegetables to that community, as well as active fitness classes. At that same time, we would like to reintroduce some educational services, including GED, certification classes, and tutoring with the help of MTC, MTI, as well as Ramal. We would also, at that same time, like to do a focus on health and wellness. So with the help of the hospital district and the Community Home Project, what we will be able to do is do some diabetes screening, some diabetes classes, along with health and wellness services such as dental units, bringing in different medical services depending on the need of the community, but start those conversations then to see what the exact needs in the community are. As well as opening up the resource area. So we have computers there. We can have that available to individuals who would like to apply for jobs, who would like information on social services. They have access to that resource room and those computers. As that foundation starts to get built, as we look at the remainder of 2022, we do have some financial literacy classes that will be starting in May, so we will have that available to the community. And as we move forward, we would like to focus on future health and wellness initiatives, from cooking classes, from culinary training, food storage, as well as bringing in different speakers, from motivational speakers, speakers for small business forums, entrepreneurs, really just bringing in different individuals who can offer a variety of services to that community. And through our partnerships and collaboration conversations that we've had, we're confident that this is something we would be able to do relatively easily. Rashad Jones has already agreed to be one of those speakers, so he is very excited about plugging in and partnering with us on this project. All right, at this time, any questions?
Board. I'm just really excited.
I know, I'm like, I don't have any questions. It's just a statement. I mean, this is a community center. I mean, this is exactly what we've been talking about, and I think that the partnership with the hospital district is going to be a spectacular opportunity, and they already had kind of a vision for some of this, and so we have a location, and I love it whenever a plan comes together. I'm excited.
Absolutely. Thank you, Board Member Campbell. Anyone else? Board?
I'm looking at this timeline. I'm seeing some of the things that I heard come out of that advisory committee. So I'm glad to hear that you heard the committee. If it's a community center, you have to have community input.
Absolutely.
It can't be a community center without them. So, thank you.
Yes, wonderful.
We will continue, so even at the start of this timeline.
Yeah, you know better.
Can't escape the microphone.
Even at the start of the timeline in January, we will still have collaboration with our program manager and our community advisory, so that to ensure that the needs of the community are being met throughout the different events and activities that we have. So it's not a one and done deal. It will be a collaboration throughout.
Now, my follow-up question to this is, we saw and heard, how are we marketing this? How are we getting this information out? How are we going to get this out to that community to know that these services are there? Because if we are doing it in secrecy, it's not a community center. It's just our thing.
Right, so great question. So we were, with Dr. Brooks, we actually was coming up with a plan for communication. So we're reaching out. She has given us a lot of different people, leads in the community where we can give that information. We are also going to have it in a magazine publication as well. So we have different departments that both Lauren and I are working on and getting this information out.
Thank you.
And just to add on to that, so the magazine is Talk of the Town that Dr. Brooks suggested, so we will be getting. Town Talk, yes.
Town Talk.
We will be getting information ahead of time to those individuals to publish it. The Governor's West meeting is a great opportunity to promote this information. As a district, we are starting to widen our communication channels as well, so we will have more opportunity to share all of the awesome things that are going on throughout Marion County Public Schools and as it relates to Howard Academy.
Let me give you a word of advice. Don't forget the black church.
I was going to say,
Yes.
church bulletins, please, church bulletins and announcements.
Because
So for the Black History Museum, we have gotten the flyers out. At least we're still getting them out, but right there to the churches, right there in our vicinity,
Correct.
they already have those flyers for the soft opening. So we're getting them out to the other churches as well.
thank you.
Yes, it's all in the spirit of how do we really reach people? And it sounds like you're working hard to do that. Thank you. Board Member Browning, you're participating remotely today and want to make sure you have the opportunity to ask your questions, sir.
Yes, thank you. It's exciting to see this all coming together, and I especially want to get the Stanton-Wearsdale area into the museum component of this, because we have just an incredible history starting in 1904, essentially, in that part of Marion County. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Chair, I do have a question.
Yes.
I have a quick question. Are you guys communicating with the Mary Sue Rich Center also, so we're not overlapping and any of that? I just thought about that.
Is it okay if I introduce Ms. Velez with the
Please.
hospital district? Because they have a very important role in that, yes.
Join the party.
So the hospital, I'm the Chief Operating Officer at the Hospital District, Deborah Velez. Thank you for your opportunity to speak. We do partner with the Mary Sue Rich. We actually have provided them with $2.3 million worth of funding in there. So we are also providing some programming in that facility as well as it relates to fitness and nutrition and diabetes education. So in our involvement, if we are so lucky to be a part of the Howard Academy situation, we also have funding that we would attach to that location as well. And we also, in the West Ocala area, have Beacon Point property, which provides free substance abuse and mental health counseling in that area as well. So all of those different areas will be able to communicate and link all of those folks to the Howard Academy Center, just shift them on over there for services. So,
And Estella Bird.
say that again?
And Estella Bird.
Anna Stellenberg.
Please say that. Please say that. Yes. Thank you.
No problem.
A lot of connecting.
A lot of connecting dots.
Yes, yes. And I just wanted to make a couple quick compliments. Whenever I drive by the community garden, it's so impressive, and it's just seems like it's gotten bigger every year, and it's well tended, and it's just beautiful and very inviting. And I was thinking about services, and we've had really good participation with our wellness bus that comes around Marion County Public Schools. Is very convenient for staff to hop on the bus and get those assessments. And also the Bloodmobile, comes around from time to time, and all part of being, a community citizen and doing what you can to help others is always a good thing. And then the only other thing I was thinking of, just in my own passion, but also the culture of Marion County is very animal oriented, so maybe at some point the Humane Society can be involved in some way. And that's a partnership with Marion County Public Schools as well, because we're required by statute to teach humane treatment of animals. And that all goes together in Wellness for Children and everybody else. So a few things that start flying through my mind, it's just such an inspiring project. And thank you so much for all the hard work you're putting into it. And thank you, Board Member Cummings, for being the lead on the committee for this from the school board side.
Thank you.
It's fun to see it coming to fruition. Can't wait till January.
They're doing the hard work. Dr.
Yes,
Reese,
it
thank you, and thank you for the team.
Yes.
Thank you for the team in the hospital district for the partnership. So.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys.
All right, have a great day.
We'll see you back at our next work session, Ms. Velez.
That's right, you're becoming a regular. Is there any public comment? Hearing none.
Oh, wait, you have public comment.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Richard Howard, Senior, 4900 Southwest 46th Court, Ocala, Florida 34475. Before you all leave, you've done a great presentation to the board. Chair Mrs. Nancy Throy, and to all the board members, and our great superintendent. Listening at your report, my only question is, I have two questions. When we start in January, our light start, what hours will we have at the center? What will be the hours? In the afternoon, since this is a community, this will be a community.
The hours will be flexible based on the needs of the activities and community. So the hours will be flexible. It won't be just because we're there at 8 in the morning, it won't be 8. So that program manager hours will be flexible upon them being hired.
Okay, and my second question while you're here.
Yeah, while I'm here.
Is that in the use of the facilities at the soft start, when will we be able to utilize that and rent the facilities if you want to have activities in the evening and the cafeteria part?
So we are already taking calls. We already have schedules, so we have a lot of things already happening in January. So we're taking schedules and getting time. So if anybody that has any events that want to come up for starting in January, they can call now and start scheduling, because we have already been taking calls and scheduling events.
Okay, my last question, I'll be through, is that when we talk about communication and getting the word out, is it possible that we can have a website connected to the school board that people can go and look at that site, and we will know the activities that will happen, and the announcements, of course, will go out through the churches and things, but someone can go to that website, see the announcement, even see the scheduled dates, what is available, events already taken, and now you have a schedule that is open that you can begin to look at, and we can have that on the website at school board, okay?
Yes.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yes.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Reverend
Pastor
Howard.
Howard, yes. And
He was one of the committee members.
Yeah.
For the community.
And that's a great idea. If there's a link for the Howard Community Center, click on the link to.
So, Madam Chair, if I may, there is already a page on our website, but
Yes.
because it doesn't have a unique identifier, perhaps we might want to pursue actually purchasing the domain name. I'm just thinking out loud. I don't know if we want to go that route, but for Howard Academy or Howard Academy Community Center or something to that effect, because at this juncture, it's page-505048, and if you don't know how to find it, you're not going to. So, to your point, Pastor Howard, thank you.
Right.
And before you go, Dr. Reese, I want to thank you and the team, but I also want to thank Cassandra Boston for all that she did prior to her retirement, because a lot of these things were already in place. They just need to be re-upped or redone. And so we thank that team that she led that, and you're just taking the baton and running with it. So continue running, running.
She was very instrumental in getting me my start where I needed to go, because she informed me of all of the events that was already in place prior to the closing for COVID and construction, and so we had a good starting place.
Yes. Thank you.
That is truly wonderful, and you're definitely hearing from this board that we support you guys 100%, and we'll be excited to see what sort of technology you'll implement to just get the message out to the community and keep everybody up to date on what's going to be happening there, and it sounds like it's going to be a lot.
Yes.
So, good deal. All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, take good care. You too. Before we go on to our COVID-19 updates and then our quarterly review, would it be the pleasure of the board to take a quick break, or are we good? We're good? Okay. All right.
Y'all good?
All right. We'll go ahead and do our COVID-19 updates, and I didn't want to forget.
Thank you. You can ask again after the COVID-19 update.
Okay. That's actually what I would say might be a more natural break, because the quarterly data review, we definitely want to be fresh for that. Okay. We want to be fresh for everything. All right. Let's move on then to our COVID-19 updates.
Good morning.
I know. Yeah.
Okay. Good
Morning,
morning,
Dr.
Chair.
Hembrook.
Good morning, Chair Thrower, Vice Chair King, fellow board members, Attorney Powers, Superintendent Gullett, and Ms. Prestipino. So we're here today to just kind of present and share with you an update on the process and communication to families for volunteers and visitors now that they are permitted into schools. So I have the pleasure of sharing with you the communication to families that has been going out, and some additional messaging will also go out this week. So first, families are going to be communicated that each elementary school is going to be developing a start of different events that might include volunteers or visitors on their campus. It's definitely going to be a fluid document. They're going to post that on their website. But as things progress throughout the school year, they may add additional events. But this is just a way for families to know an idea of what events that we might have some volunteers and visitors on campus, so that they're aware of those opportunities. Then the other thing that we did was we drafted a student participation with volunteers, visitors opt-out letter. So for families that aren't comfortable with their students participating in or engaging with volunteers or visitors, we have that opt-out letter. It's very similar to the mask opt-out, just that little language was changed. It doesn't necessarily mean, though, that students won't have the opportunity to participate in those events. We'll just have to provide an MCPS employee, or, for example, if it's a holiday store, then we would allow the student to go there without that volunteer present, right? So making sure that students still have the opportunities. But that letter will be posted on the district website and school websites as well for families that choose to use that form. Mr. Christian's actually, we're working with Mr. Christian to draft a Skylar message detailing all of this to families, specifically about where that calendar of events on the school websites can be found, so that they can go to that at any time. We're also going to reiterate to families that volunteers and visitors are now welcome on campus. And so then we're at the secondary level, though I do want to point this out, that opt-out letter will be there. But at a secondary level, if you can imagine, it's a little bit more tricky to monitor teenage students during lunch, right? So if there's a volunteer on campus during lunch per se, or before or after school, it's a little bit harder at the secondary level to monitor exactly which of those students opted out, because they're not necessarily in a homeroom as in elementary. So we are going to also communicate and ask families to communicate with their teenagers or their middle school students their preference of whether or not they want their child to interact with those volunteers. And so that's the communication that will go out to families. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Ms. Kynard.
Thank you, Dr. Hembrook. Good morning, Ms. Kynard.
All right, good morning, everyone. The process for the events that will involve volunteers and visitors, we've made the same protocol for all schools, so that all schools are clear on that. And we've already communicated with our principals and assistant principals, school-based administrators, so that they are aware of the process. We will certainly at our schools continue with all mitigation strategies, which include disinfecting all of the areas that any volunteer or visitor would be present at, along with the students, with the proxy HDOCs. It includes hand washing washing, hand sanitizer, gel in, gel out, social distancing as much as possible, and certainly making sure that we use as many outside spaces as we can, or larger spaces when necessary as well. Schools will certainly assign those specific volunteers to specific classrooms as much as possible. They also have been asked to limit the volunteers to work no more than with 3 classrooms at a time. And so that way we know exactly which classrooms volunteers are with. We're not having one volunteer visit half the school or 6 classrooms. It's 3 classrooms for right now. And any changes to this can certainly be discussed with their area superintendent because we know, right, that sometimes different circumstances come up. So we would be involved in that decision. Schools, again, will schedule all of the volunteer events anytime the volunteers are on campus, again, with those outside areas as much as possible, larger spaces, scheduling them in larger classrooms or rooms as much as possible. Schools will track exactly where the volunteer is going, which classrooms they've worked with. All of that will be documented at the front office level, and visitors as well. The duration of time will be documented, when they arrived, when they left, and then which students they're working with will be documented, in which classrooms, in which areas on campus, and especially the ones that they've worked with if they haven't been able to maintain that 6 feet distance for social distancing and under the 15 minutes. So that will all be documented at the school level. We have seen, a couple of schools that have already begun to have 1 or 2 volunteers, and they've been very mindful of, we've really seen limited volunteers back. I mean, we welcome them, right, as they're going through the volunteer process and getting approved, but we've seen some really great benefits to having volunteers back on campuses, and the principals, the school-based administrators, the teachers, the staff have been very mindful, because they do want to have them back, of making sure that they're documenting everything so that we can continue to have safety at the forefront. Schools will also have the volunteers and visitors continue to complete the MCPS COVID screening questionnaire. We've worked with the Department of Health, Mark Landers, as well as Andrea Simmons and our team to make sure that we have the most updated COVID questionnaire out there. So our front office at our schools have that document. And then as well, we know that the volunteers and visitors also have to continue to sign in at the front office using Raptor. So that's just another source of documentation that we have for everyone that's on our campuses. That is what we are doing moving forward in elementary land with volunteers and visitors. And we welcome everyone to fill out, the volunteer form is now online, as well as they can receive paper copies from a school. But I hear from Dennis McFadden that the online process for volunteers is working very well as well.
Great. Thank you very much. Okay. And does this conclude the COVID-19 updates? We've heard from everybody. Don't want to leave anyone out. Okay. Questions from the board? Comments?
I just have a comment. Thank you guys for working hard. I know you guys were on that DOH call, Ms. Hembrook. I heard you before, or Dr. Hembrook, excuse me, before I had to jump off. And, I'm not sure people understand all the different intricacies, of trying to reopen and that. And I also appreciate, there was also foresight too. Like, I know there were schools that were going ahead and they did go through the process of the volunteers so that they are ready when you guys did open it up. And it just seems to be a group effort. And thank you so much.
Thank you. Board Member Browning? Okay.
Yes, no comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Just a couple quick things. We really need volunteers. We really do. And there's so many opportunities and ways for people to volunteer. And I'm thinking of anything from helping make copies in the guidance office to direct contact with kids. What else can we do to message out our need for volunteers to the community? Because we've been without volunteers for quite some time. And just like, with the Howard Academy, not even quite remembering at some levels that there was activity going on there all along until COVID stopped everything. And now we're trying to restart. And the need has always been great, but I would offer that maybe it's even greater now, and it is a wonderful opportunity, especially for people to decide if even coming to work for us is for them. We've had a lot of employees that have started as volunteers and then decided to apply for jobs. So I'm not sure what other messaging or new messaging we can do to really get this need out there. Our community involvement is so incredibly important. They've supported us really through all of this, and we've had a lot of negotiating with the community throughout COVID-19, and it's worked because we kept schools open and we did the best we could for kids. So I would welcome any ideas, any Skylard opportunities, to just really convey that our doors are open. We've got safety protocols in place. The opportunities are endless.
It's a great opportunity to mention our Facebook page that just went live this week. So if anyone's listening, which there may be 60 people, we do have a new district.
After work.
Yeah, I know, just district-wide Facebook page. So obviously that's only as good as the number of people who end up liking the page and following the page. But that would be perfect information to put out on it about the volunteer application, and perhaps we're already on that. Welcome back, Greg. Perhaps we're already on that, but those are exactly the types of things that would be perfect to push out to our community and trying to get those folks engaged.
Because your team has just worked so hard to get all of the procedures in place so that volunteers can feel welcome and safe and all of that. So now we just need them to come in like a 7-nation army. Dr. Collett?
Thank you, Madam Chair. If I may add, I was thinking as I was listening to the list, and of course I'm involved with this process and thank the team as well. While this is a very comprehensive list, I do not want anyone to misunderstand that or think that we are not asking them to come, because we certainly have open arms and encourage our visitors and our volunteers. I've been out talking about that quite a bit in the community, and I don't want the list to intimidate anyone and for that to be misunderstood. So a lot of these things are happening behind the scenes. We just want to provide reassurance and be diligent in our work, but we absolutely welcome our folks back on our campuses. And I'm speaking on behalf of not just the area superintendents in front of you, but our school teams, that I know that they're excited to have our parents and our community members back. So thank you.
Thank you. Anything else from the board? Board Member Browning?
Yes, no comment.
Thank you, sir. All right, well, thanks again for everything. Is there any public comment? All right, hearing none. Before we do our deep dive into quarterly data, let's go ahead and take no more than a 10-minute break, because we are going to have to recess at 11 for our attorney-client session. So we definitely want to get your presentation in before that time. Okay, it's 10:06. Let's try to be back by 10:15. Thank you.
And we're ready.
All right, we are resuming our work session at 10:15, and we are moving on to our quarterly data review with Mr. Ben Whitehouse. Good morning, sir.
Good morning to you, Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, board members, Dr. Gullett, always good, Ms. Prespino, and Attorney Powers. Thank you all for having me here. We're here, myself and the area superintendents, to go through our first quarter data review of our schools, which we wrapped up that quarterly standards mastery assessment in mid-October, and we're going to take you through our data analysis to show the progress of where we are at this point. And our clicker wasn't working, so we're going to try to operate this with the mouse over here if we can, but we appear to be struggling with our mouse too.
And nothing is working now.
Batteries? Do we need new batteries?
It doesn't want you to present, Mr. White.
I've got my paper copy. I can
I
start
know, I
talking.
have my electronic copy.
Nobody else is going to see anything.
Do you have your paper copy?
I do have my paper copy.
Yeah.
Okay,
Do you have it pulled up?
carry
I
on
got
while they're
you.
working.
Okay, we have it pulled up. We're good.
Okay.
Do you have yours?
I will carry on. So the first thing I want to bring to your attention on that second slide, we have made some updates to the presentation for this year. So last year, what we traditionally saw in the years past is just the average of the Qsma scores comparing year over year. But we made some shifts this year, first quarter, and so I want to highlight those. First, in our elementary schools in ELA and math, we did shift some of those standards around on the curriculum maps for the first quarter. So we took a look at data from the previous year and identified standards where we have historically struggled and moved those standards to the beginning of the year so that we could spend more time addressing those standards. The challenge with doing that then is that when we compare one assessment from the previous year to the new year, we're testing different standards to a large degree. So we can't just simply compare the assessment average. So in order to address that, you'll notice you'll have some additional slides in here. Yeah, all right, we're live. Thank you, Kevin. You'll notice there are some additional slides in here that I'll show you in just a moment where we are actually looking standard by standard. And the purpose of that, it helps us to really get a more accurate picture from year to year because even though what we're assessing changes, we assessed all the standards last year, and so we can do a more granular comparison that way to really see where we are making some progress and where we still have room for improvement. We've also added in some new target averages for our schools, which I'll highlight more when we get to that slide. And that just allows us to provide a temperature check to track the progress of our students towards proficiency. We've done a lot of data analysis over the years of how our students perform on the Qsma versus how they perform when they take the FSA. And that allows us to do a little bit better in terms of predictability using the Qsma results and measuring how we think our students will perform on the FSA as a result of that. So the first slide you'll see here, this is our ELA standards comparison for the district. So this shows you standard by standard, last year compared to this year. And just to orient you, on the left side there, you have all of the standards that are assessed in reading, and they are subdivided by clusters. Those clusters are designated by the 1, 2, or 3, and that just groups those standards into overarching categories in ELA. And then you'll see going across the top, we have 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, just so we can compress all that data onto one slide for you and allow you to look at all of our elementary ELA scores from year over year. You'll also notice at the top there of the 3rd column under 3rd grade, you'll see an NA. Anytime you see an NA on these standard sheets, it just means that we did not have a standard on the curriculum map this quarter for that standard, so we could not provide the data to it because our QSMAs are connected to whatever is on the curriculum maps. So if you see an NA, that just means we tested it one year, but we have yet to test it this year, but we will, and we'll add that data in once it comes. Any questions about the new layout before I move on?
No, sir.
Okay. So the next slide on here you'll see is math. Again, you'll see that we have a number of standards there that are not assessed. And so where you see those dashed lines, again, we just don't have the data for those particular grade levels, but because we're showing all 3 grade levels on one slide, we had to include the standard because they were assessed in some grade levels, but not others. Right. So as you track your way across, you'll see that at some point in one of those grade levels, there are standard comparisons for that particular standard. So those dashes are representing that we just don't have the data. The NAs on these are indicating that we had less than than 2 questions, and it's hard to really give an accurate picture of where our students are if there's only one question connected to a standard. But at the same time, we try not to make the QSMAs so lengthy that they become a very time-consuming process. They really are just meant to give us quick temperature checks on our student progress to be able to support our teachers and our students. So the next slide shows you our science standard by standard comparison. Again, in science, we only assess at the 5th grade level on the NGSSS standards assessment, but we progress monitor 3rd and 4th grade because those standards really build on each other year over year. And so we want to make sure that we're monitoring how our students are learning in 3rd and 4th grade so that we can then support them better when they get to 5th grade for that assessment year. So obviously in 5th grade, we have more standards assessed because that is the key year. So this next slide is the one that you're a little bit more familiar with. This shows you the average from last year to this year of the QSMA scores for each of those assessments, ELA, math, and science, going down the left-hand side there. Again, you'll see the scores look a lot lower, but as I mentioned at the beginning, we tested the harder standards initially. So we expected the average to look a little lower. That's why we did the standard by standard breakdown, so we could get a little bit better picture of how our students are performing. The far right there shows you the target average. So again, that analysis that we've done with the QSMA scores compared to FSA scores, when you average all 3 QSMA scores, students, for instance, in 3rd grade ELA, who tend to average a 60% across all 3 QSMAs, most often than not are proficient. And so we use that as a guide for the schools. It's not a guarantee. It doesn't mean that if a student scores a 60 on all 3, they're guaranteed to be proficient. I don't think we can guarantee anything, but it gives us a really good indicator because it is a strong correlation for those assessments. So that just shows you where we're aiming towards. The other 2 columns, the percent of students meeting the target average, shows you how many of our students are already at that point after the first quarter that they're already averaging those scores in that first assessment. We expect, obviously, this number to improve because, again, it's an average of all 3 QSMAs. We've only covered 9 weeks. There's still lots of opportunity for us to go back and reteach, remediate, reassess based on the data that we get from these QSMAs. So we expect that number that you'll see in the second to last column to continue to go up each quarter as we progress through the standards and go back and reteach and reassess some of those other standards that we've covered during the first quarter.
And you may have already answered this. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Mr. Whitehouse. But these percentages and the information, this is QSMA 1. So this is the number that was proficient, the percentage of proficiency. And remind me again if this is the cohort that we're watching 2020 to 2020, 2021 to
Right, so if you just went straight across left to right, you would see 3rd grade last year, 3rd grade this year. So different cohort, same grade level, same standards being assessed. If you went down diagonally from 3rd last year to 4th this year, it would show you a cohort improvement. But again, we're testing different standards, so we really couldn't do that cohort tracking this year on this assessment like we could in the past, which is why normally you would see that we would highlight those cohort changes, but we couldn't do it this year because it's not a fair analysis looking at last year this year.
Thank you. And just as a reminder, if anybody in the community is seeing this, that 5th grade class is the class that did not receive testing, FSA testing, because of COVID when they were 3rd graders.
Correct. And that was also the year that they could avoid being retained if they wanted to. And so we had a large number of students that would typically have been retained that did not, that had progressed to 4th grade last year and are now in 5th grade this year. Absolutely.
Yes, and for all of those reasons, that was a really smart shift to focus on the standards that have been historically weaker earlier in the year, to give the kids the most opportunity to learn those standards and become as proficient as possible in them. So that's very smart.
Absolutely. And this is, again, not the only time we'll see these standards. We'll continue to go back and readdress these standards as we move forward. Our teachers will use those for interventions, for small group work, to make sure that we're meeting the needs of our students as we progress. So we're going to now spotlight 3 schools from each of our areas, and the schools we selected were based on their data, just so we can talk through some of the support that the area superintendents and other district personnel are currently providing as we work together to make sure we're meeting the needs of all of our students. And one of the things we'll talk about is we've done a lot more this year with data analysis with our schools. My team, supporting the work of the area superintendents, have been going out meeting with leadership teams individually at schools and also working with teams of principals together to really do a deeper dive into their results from these QSMAs, not only just looking at standards expectations, but digging in question by question and really trying to do some error analysis of why are our students struggling with these questions and this content to make sure that we're doing a better job of supporting the work of our teachers and students. But please note, as in the past, I will be sending out all of the school's data following this work session, even though we're only going to show you 3 from each area in this one. That way, if you have questions about any of the schools, you'll have all of their data that you can reference following this meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Whitehouse.
All right, good morning again.
Good morning, Dr. Lindbergh.
Thank you. I was actually going to take a moment to, before I jumped into the data of my schools, was to actually point out that trend for 5th grade. So Board Member Campbell, thank you actually for pointing that out. We did want to reiterate that 5th grade group, you're going to see that their scores for QSMA are definitely lower than 3rd and 4th grade, right? Because that is they were 3rd graders when we shut down because of the pandemic in March of 2020. That was also the year, as you mentioned, that they didn't have the assessment. So as area superintendents, Ms. Keinert and I are really being very strategic and monitoring that 5th grade group. So we wanted to point that out as well. So the first school data that I'm going to share with you is Bellevue Santos. So when you look at the data for Bellevue Santos, you will definitely see when you're comparing and looking at the QSMA averages for math and ELA, you'll see that there are greater gaps in ELA for Bellevue Santos. And so we are definitely focused on that for that particular school. One of the specific strategies that I implement with Bellevue Santos is that all of my schools get data meetings, but Bellevue Santos gets a data meeting at their school with their entire leadership team every time that there's data available, so that we're able to continually reassess our goals and progress monitor towards those goals. Another specific strategy that we're implementing at Bellevue Santos is that all teachers during their normal instruction, they're collecting and using formative assessment daily checks for understanding on the learning target for that day. Then they bring that data back into collaborative planning. As a grade level team, they assess the data results for that particular learning target, and then teachers have the opportunity to share and ask questions of each other if they see that one teacher data outscored another teacher's data. And one specific example that I can remember this school year already is that one teacher in 3rd grade, her scores were really higher, significantly higher than the others, and she was able to share that when she was going through instruction, she did a lot of think alouds and modeled examples for students, and so then the teachers replicated that instructional strategy in their next lesson plans. To specifically focus on ELA, the other strategy that we're using at Bellevue Santos is we're creating model ELA lessons with all of the teachers, and then that ELA lesson is implemented in the classroom with the teachers that created it observing and collecting data based on the lesson format and the response from students. Then as a team, as a grade level, they come back and they look at all of that data together and they talk about what instructional strategies were really impactful based on their observations. And then again, they try to use those and plan strategically to incorporate some of those instructional strategies in their lessons as well. Legacy Elementary, again, you're going to see those greater gaps in ELA than in math. Legacy also specifically receives data meetings as well. Student pathways and assessments also is in attendance at those meetings at the school level with the entire leadership team. We definitely use the QSMA data to determine and schedule which classroom walks that we're going to conduct with the leadership team. So we do that in order to observe the actual instruction in those classrooms. So we drill down that QSMA data into specific grade levels and teachers, and we really walk those classrooms to figure out what specific feedback that we can give to those particular grade levels or classrooms to help really strengthen instruction to improve student achievement in the long run. During collaborative planning, also, the leadership team is present. The coaches, teachers, and admin are really trying to shift and focus on how instruction is going to occur. So when we're planning a lesson, it's not just what are we going to do, but it's how is a teacher going to take the students through that process. What questions is the teacher going to ask regarding that standard? We also are focusing on what misconceptions that students are going to have with that standard so that we can plan purposefully to address those misconceptions that students tend to demonstrate based on that standard. District support is being provided during this collaborative planning as well as I mentioned, with the leadership team. The other support that we're providing to Legacy is that we're pushing in some district support to model effective lessons, including effective instructional strategies, so the teachers can see that in action. Legacy, as I mentioned, also we do those I'm there 3 times a month, so we do weekly walks with them, and based on our walks for each of those weeks, we sit together as a leadership team and we develop specific action steps that are then looked at the following week, or sometimes it's by the end of the week as well, to see what the impact of those action steps are. My final school is Marion Oakes. Again, same trends. ELA is definitely an area of need. They have greater gaps in the ELA data than they do in math. Collaborative planning is one of the focus areas for Marion Oakes. During this time, what we're focusing on at Marion Oakes is to help teachers and the leadership team really design student tasks that are related to the standard. But in those student tasks, we want to make sure that we're including all of the ways that the students would be assessed. So we call those test item demands. And so we look at how those assessment items are going to be asked, and we try to incorporate all of those in student tasks during collaborative planning. So this actually came out as a focus when we conducted our first instructional review back in September with this particular school, that was definitely an area of need. And so we're tracking that data, and when I conduct my weekly visits at Marion Oakes, we're still looking at that, and we are seeing that that data is improving from September to now so far. We're going to continue that focus area. The other thing we're doing at Marion Oakes Elementary is that the support facilitators are attending collaborative planning to specifically help gen ed teachers with specific strategies that students in the Exceptional Student Education Program would benefit from when the general ed teacher is providing her Tier 1 instruction. And so that collaborative effort is really helping to give strategies in the classroom so that our ESE students are successful as well. Data is a focus, as obviously. The other thing that we do is we look at the comparative results of Qsma to also look to see what are opportunities that our teachers can plan for reteach during a small group instruction during Tier 1. So whether that's a teacher-led small group, or it's a para or a support facilitator, but they're going back to some of those standards where our students were not quite successful, and they're providing reteach opportunities with some of those strategies, again, that would be helpful for all students. And that's the data from my 3 schools and some of those specific strategies. I will go ahead and turn it over to Ms. Kindard.
Thank you, Dr. Humbrook.
Thanks. All right, good morning again.
Morning.
Okay, as we begin, just wanted to reiterate, the members of the transformation team are working with our schools to help facilitate that Tier 1 collaborative planning with the administrators on campus, with the teams of teachers, helping them to really define what the ELA blocks and the math block look like in the classroom so that we can strategically push in that support in the right places in front of the right students. Being able to walk intentionally with our administrators, offering feedback, and providing support to our teachers and students that need that based on the data, as well as working with student pathways and assessments on those data reviews. The schools that I'm going to talk about here today are schools that we're looking at data with them multiple times a week. and many of them are working through common assessments that they're doing with their students as well. When you look at East Marion Elementary, you certainly, when you look at this Qsma data specifically, you will certainly see larger gaps in that ELA, definitely that fifth grade cohort, as has been mentioned previous to me being up here, definitely some larger gaps that we're working through. We have been very strategic in the teachers that we have put in front of our fifth grade students at East Marion. We have some very strong and veteran teachers in front of the students of the fifth grade cohort, as well as pushed in support facilitators, paraprofessionals as needed to try to make the groups smaller so that we can really define exactly what we're doing in front of the students for instruction. The focus for quarter two continues to be on that tier 1 ELA math and science standards, really trying to make sure that we're reteaching quarter 1 standards that the students did not master. Thinking through how many students we did have absent in quarter 1. We have gone back in small groups. We're able to have a double dose opportunity of those cluster 1 standards, especially for ELA, that many students did not have an opportunity to master. Another goal that we have at East Marion that we're working hard to improve upon is working on student attendance in order to increase that exposure for our students to the content-specific instruction. We need our students there in front of our teachers and support staff in order to be able to cover that Tier 1 instruction. Based on the meetings, the data meetings that were held at the beginning of quarter 2, as well as the needs assessment that we put out to our staff at East Marion, we've worked with them to help identify that specific small group time again during the ELA and math blocks to really be able to intervene and provide that additional support. We do have an ELA and math intervention teacher now at East Marion, and so they're able to push in. They work daily. They have schedules based on the data, and they're able to work with students on those specific skills that need to be retaught. One of the strategies that we're working with at East Marion, we've worked with the leadership team again, as well as their ELA content area specialist, to really be intentional on collaborative standard-based planning. We've created their own creation of grade level and ELA pacing calendar at East Marion based on their data of their students to really focus on the grade level Tier 1 tasks that they'll be putting in front of their students and really what that evidence of learning looks like. They're working through common assessments. The teachers meet in collaborative planning. They decide what that common assessment is going to look like for that particular standard that they're teaching with their students the following week. Then they bring that data back to their collaborative planning time, and they're able to share how their students did on those common assessments and what strategies are really working for their particular students. The calendar also provides a repeated review of the standard as a double dose opportunity, really planning for that differentiated practice with guided opportunities in front of our students. And again, those common assessments to progress monitor the students being taught weekly. There's also, not only are we focusing on the Tier 1 instruction, but as we're trying to close the gap of our students at East Marion, we have to ensure that there's continuous progress monitoring of our MTSS interventions, as well as what the student's response to that intervention is. We have to look at that weekly. The teachers are doing a wonderful job of being in front of their students. Really, they have students that go out to other classrooms. They've really been able to place the correct intervention in front of students. We're able to look at the tracking folders each week to ensure that the progress is being made to the students. And if there isn't, we're able to adjust that so that the student is in the appropriate group. Specific students have been identified for after-school tutoring, which starts in November at East Marion. There's always a great response with their teachers and support staff at East Marion for staying after school, which is already an extended hour school, but they stay after school until close to 5 o'clock to help our students there. The Homeschool Liaison and Guidance Department are working collaboratively to support the school-wide attendance program plan. Again, I had mentioned that was another goal they had there. School counselors provide families with the relevant information so that the parents really understand, that negative impact that happens when they don't have their students in front of the teachers and when there's excessive absences. They've also implemented a coffee with the counselor time. We have a full-time counselor there, but we also have a full-time mental health counselor at East Marion. And so they've worked collaboratively with each other and the parents to try to implement a coffee with the counselor. Opportunity, it gives the parents an opportunity to get in front of the counselors, and they can, kind of in an informal setting, they can talk to them about strategies that they can utilize at home with their students as well. Okay, Emerald Shores Elementary. So when reviewing the data for Emerald Shores from the district quarterly assessment, we can see that the fifth grade cohort actually did increase their average by 4 percentage points from the math QSMA from last year. So I kind of wanted to point that out. Definitely ELA is certainly still a focus here for us. The fourth grade cohort, it did increase their average in science QSMA from last year, as well as, again, that fifth grade cohort increased their average quite a bit on the science QSMA from last year's 9 percentage points. So while our focus certainly is, it's not high enough just because they were increasing, right? They had some, we still want to increase higher. We're still not high enough where we need to have all of our students proficient, so we're still working through that. We're continuing to focus on ELA and math standards in quarter 2, reteaching the standards from quarter 1 that they struggled with. Again, providing that double dose opportunity of quarter 1 standards in ELA and math. Emerald Shores as well has paced out their calendar where they're able to offer that double dose opportunity. So it's spelled out very clearly for the teachers and support staff on which standards they're doing which week. And again, it's fluid because we always go back and monitor how the students have if they're mastering those double dose opportunities. In an effort to improve Tier 1 instruction for all students across the content areas at Emerald Shores, collaboration continues to be a primary focus for us there. I do have, again, a member of the transformation team that is between Emerald Shores and Greenway every week. We started that in quarter 2. Ms. Kemp has been working at both of those 2 schools. Those have been her main priority schools. As the data told us that we received in quarter 1, that's where we really needed to focus and target our time and efforts and being strategic about their collaborative planning. We also sent a teacher survey out towards the end of quarter 1 to the teachers at Emerald Shores, and based on that feedback, we were able to restructure the collaborative planning time for the teachers at quarter 2. One of the really awesome things that some of the teachers have really taken on ownership of at Emerald Shores is that they assign a specific teacher for each week, a specific standard, and they become the expert in that standard. And then they come back to their grade level team at collaborative planning, and they share everything they learned about that standard and all the resources that can be used, because we know as teachers that there's not just one resource for every standard. You know, we have to look sometimes in multiple resources to really reach the depth of that standard, you know, and how it's going to be shown on the test. And so they've really enjoyed that, and as a matter of fact, we're using some of that as a learning opportunity for some of our other schools, kind of a model that the teachers have done there. Certainly another strategy that they started in quarter 1 that they've continued in quarter 2 that has been successful for them. Common assessments were a main focus there this year at Emerald Shores. Again, they determine at collaborative planning what that common assessment will be for that standard for the following week. They give that common assessment to their students once they've taught through the standard, and then they bring it back, and they bring the data back so that they can talk through that with their peers. Basically coming up with, how did you teach that? Because we all know just because we go into the classroom with the same set of plans, we all teach it a little bit differently. You know, it's kind of it's the how. You know, how did we get our students to talk? How did we get our students to have that conversation and going deeper into that standard? And so they're able to talk through that with their peers. And at Emerald Shores, we have some veteran teachers, but we also have some newbies and some early career teachers. And so that's a very good conversation for both sides to hear. Both sets of teachers bring varying ideas to the table. Certainly, we focus on continuing progress monitoring of MTSS interventions and the students' response to intervention as well at Emerald Shores. And again, the administrators as well as transformation team, specifically Ms. Kemp working quarter 2, has been there to help define all of their collaborative plannings and help facilitate that. A lot of times it's us sitting back and really listening to the teachers and the conversation, and then being able to ask the right questions at the right time that gets them to that deeper thinking of how they're going to what that really is going to look like in their classrooms. Okay, Greenway Elementary is my final school I'm going to talk about and highlight today. When reviewing the District QSMA quarterly assessment for Greenway, the Overall data, you can see some increases there with that fourth grade cohort on science from last year. Again, the fifth grade cohort as well on that science Qsma from last year. So they had some a little bit of growth in the science area. Certainly, we're going to continue to have a focus on science, but a certain greater focus as well on Tier 1 in ELA and math. Certainly reteaching those quarter 1 standards that the students did not master. There will be continuous progress monitoring of those MTSS interventions and students' response to interventions. At Greenway Elementary, we also have students that, we have it at all schools, but we also have quite a few students at Greenway Elementary that were online last year, and so they've come back to us. At the beginning of last year, I want to say we had at least 2 classes per grade level at Greenway that were online. And even at the end of the year, we still had a class full of each grade level that were online. So many of our students that we're trying to close the gap on are some of our online students, not all, but many of our online students, as we drill down on the data and look at individual students. So really looking to make sure they're in the appropriate progress intervention in MTSS, and really monitoring how they're doing in that intervention to try to close that gap. Many of our students, we've been able to already look at their data and move through the intervention quickly, and they're already, they finished with phonics, and now they can really look at vocabulary and comprehension. They've been able to close that gap quickly on some of their pockets of students. So I'm proud of Greenway for that. The teachers are working very hard there, as well as the support staff and administrators. The leadership team does collect the MTSS data folders from the teachers and support staff. We call them the interventionists that are giving the intervention of the students weekly, in an effort to, again, make sure those groups are tight and fluid so that the students can move as the data shows those students are meeting their individual goals to close the gap. We certainly continue to use data to make decisions there, any adjustments that we need on our curriculum, and measure success for all of the students at Greenway. Again, that collaborative planning time is really that time the teachers are in front of us. Ms. Kemp has helped the assistant principals as well as the principal at Greenway Elementary really be able to facilitate those conversations and collaborative planning with the teachers. Again, a very veteran group of teachers at Greenway Elementary who really know the standards, and so they bring a lot to the table when they have those conversations with each other, and are able to really add some great conversation around, again, here's the standard, here's the assignment, but what does that look like in front of our students? Administration is being very intentional with classroom visits. Again, if we want to see what small group instruction looks like, we know what time of ELA block we're going in to take a look at that. And we have to be very intentional with when we're in classrooms, so that we can give that direct feedback to our teachers around what it is we're looking at and trying to see with our students. That is Greenway Elementary, and I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Frazier. No, Mr. Whitehouse.
Thank you.
Start with secondary, right?
Yes. All right, thank you. So now we're going to shift into looking at our secondary schools. So we're going to go through quickly the district level data, just so you can see again a comparison last year to this year overall for the district, and then Mr. Frazier will spotlight 3 of his schools. Different this year with secondary, we did not make many shifts to the maps or the assessments like we did with elementary. So you can actually do a little bit better comparison looking at assessments year to year from last year to this year. But to be consistent with how we're presenting the data, we still gave you a standard by standard breakdown, just so we can really, again, get granular in how we're analyzing the results of these assessments. So you'll see 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, again, broken out the same way in ELA as we did with elementary. And if you haven't already noticed, I will draw your attention, because it caught my attention as we were putting this data out. RL 2.5 in the 6th grade, about 2/3 of the way down. We saw a drop from 71% proficient last year on that standard to 6%, which is a huge drop, and we certainly would beg the question, why is that happening? So when you look at the assessment for this year, because of the number of standards we're assessing, there was only one question tied to that standard on the Qsma, and it was a difficult question that the students were asked to analyze. So they were given a text, and from that text they were asked to identify the 3 sentences that best help the author develop the plot of the story. And so they had to go back and select those 3 sentences. And consistently our students on that question got 2 of the 3 right, but they were missing 1 sentence consistently, student to student. And so doing that error analysis with those leadership teams helps us to really get down to the root cause of why are we not picking that sentence, but we're getting the other two. And that becomes the teaching tool, right? Which is really what we want these QSMAs to be, not just a measure of our progress, but a teaching tool that we can then go back and support the students to make sure that we prevent those mistakes from happening again in the future. So middle school math, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. You've probably heard this before, but just as a reminder, in 7th and 8th grade, the students that are more proficient in math shift gears and they do not take the standard 7th and 8th grade math courses. They take algebra in 7th grade, a lot of them, or algebra in 8th grade, even more of them, and geometry for those select few in 8th grade as well. And so the students that you see reflected in 7th and 8th grade here are the ones that are already struggling a little bit more with math, so we expect those scores to look a little bit lower than we typically would expect when you compare them to how they perform in 6th grade. Here's the middle school Algebra 1 and Geometry standards. Again, these are our more proficient students. You'll see that we are making some good progress. Typically, we're fairly close to 100% of our students that are taking Algebra and Geometry being proficient in middle school, but we are seeing some improvement from last year to this year again. Next is our middle school QSMA standards comparison. Again, we only assess science in 8th grade for NGSS in middle schools, but again, we want to progress monitor 6th and 7th grade as well. And 8th grade is complicated because our students take physical science in 8th grade, but the standards actually measure earth space science and life science, which we teach in 6th and 7th grade. So they're really assessed on 3 years worth of knowledge in 8th grade. So monitoring that data along the way and using that data to support our teachers in 8th grade for the large tasks that they have and really making sure our students have mastered 3 years worth of science for that assessment becomes very critical. And so we do use these for a lot of vertical conversations between those grade level teachers. Next is our Civics Assessment. This is only for 7th graders, but you can see year by year how we've performed on those standards in 7th grade. And then this shows you what you've typically seen, the QSMA average last year to this year for each of the grade levels and assessments. Again, you can see with this that there are a number of those assessments when looking last year to this year where we are performing better on average, or at least comparable on average. So some progress there is definitely welcome. And then you can see also, not surprisingly, the percent of students meeting that target average is higher in a number of those assessments this year than it was last year, which is good progress. And again, the target average for all 3 QSMAs where we would want students to be is featured over to the far right there for middle school. Next is our high school breakdown. So high school, just 9th and 10th grade for ELA QSMA assessments. Again, you'll see that we did not shift these maps much, but we still wanted to provide that standard by standard breakdown. And we are seeing several standards in there where we are progressing compared to last school year. Next is the high school algebra and geometry QSMA standards comparison. Same thing, but this group, when we get to 9th and 10th grade, these were the students that were still doing pre-algebra in middle school. So these are the students that have historically struggled with math, so we anticipate these scores to look lower than they do against the middle school scores, which is why we always want to differentiate those when we look at the breakdown of those assessments. Next are biology and U.S. history for high school, and when you go standard by standard with both of these assessments, these are our historically stronger performing state assessments in Marion County, and you'll see that we are showing some improvement last year compared to this year. And then finally, our district high school QSMA results, what we've typically showed with board presentations, looking last year to this year for each subject, the percent of our students that are on target right now to be proficient, and then of course the target average for each of those. And now we'll turn it over now to Mr. Frazier, and we'll take a look at some of those specific schools.
Thank you, Mr. Whitehouse.
Thank you. Good morning. Good morning, Chair Thrower, Vice Chair Ching, Board Member Cummings, Board Member Campbell, Attorney Powers, Ms. Prespatino, and Dr. Gullett, and Board Member Browning. I have the opportunity to present our targeted schools at the secondary level. We have weekly support from myself as well as district personnel for all 3 of these targeted schools. Like elementary school, we have also had specific data meetings with the entire leadership team to discuss and look at FSA versus Qsma data to determine some skill deficiencies for individual students, as well as even going as far as looking at the question types within Qsma, and also looking at how those question types are presented to students in the classrooms as well, to make sure they're seeing the frequency of how those questions are designed. You'll notice with Lake Ware Middle School, which is my first school to present, the common trend across elementary was a decrease in ELA. We're seeing that common trend in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade as well. However, I would point out your attention to math. Other than 6th grade, we are seeing some good progress in 7th and 8th grade as well. A strong focus on geometry and algebra, once again to make sure we're supporting those students as we continue to move throughout the school year. Like Mr. Whitehouse said, the majority of those students do have a 100% pass rate for the most part within our middle schools as we move forward. We're attributing some of that math gains as well to the 6 weeks of summer learning that all schools were provided to work through that. Some of the strategies that they're using, I've encouraged all of our secondary principals to consider our schedules and our time as a tool, that all students do not master things at the exact same time, and we need to provide some flexible time for students to be able to master some of the skill deficiencies they have available. All of our 3 targeted schools began tutoring in October, after school, for students to be able to utilize that. Lake Ware Middle is targeting a lot of their students through piloting an intervention and acceleration block 3 times a week for 20 minutes, that they are also providing some skill-specific support to all students. Our secondary program specialists are also pushing in to support in classrooms to do some side-by-side coaching, as well as during collaborative planning time to ensure that our tasks are aligned to the grade level standards. And they also have a strong focus on professional development of high-effect teaching strategies as well as literacy. Our next school is North Marion Middle School. Once again, you'll see that common trend that ELA is definitely a focal point in literacy to make sure that we're continuing. Once again, I would point your attention to math, because we are seeing some increases in math across the board in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade in North Marion Middle. They as well have been offering tutoring since October. They have student-specific data tracking through iReady that they're utilizing, as well as utilization of that iReady toolkit for skill-specific small group instruction as well. They have professional development on literacy for all their teachers, and they have a strong focus on task alignment to grade level standards, and also secondary program specialists are supporting them as well weekly. My final school to go through with you today is Lake Ware High School. You'll notice ELA, once again, common trend that we are seeing across the district in regards to a strong focus on literacy and working through. You have decreases in Algebra 1 and geometry as well. Historically in high schools, these are some of students that already have skill deficiencies in math that we focus on and try to support them to make sure they're meeting the graduation requirements in regards to that. They have a strong focus on high-quality content area literacy as well across all core content subjects. They are the heavy utilization of Career Shines platform to help students determine a path after high school through either employment, enrollment, or enlistment at that school as well. They have also been offering tutoring opportunities since October. They have they're very carefully tracking seniors to make sure they're ensuring that they have their graduation requirements completed. They are also receiving secondary program specialist support, and they are addressing their attendance through their homeschool liaison, the administration, and also their guidance counselors to make sure that they are increasing parent involvement and trying their very best and employing strategies to make sure that students are at school on a daily basis so that they can receive the quality instruction that they need. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Frazier, and thank you to all 3 of the area superintendents as well as Ms. Kemp. Clearly, you guys are working very hard, and the schools are working very hard. I'm just noticing that, considering we're just now starting to normalize, and last year was so challenging, there are a lot of areas of good progress. And what a tribute to everyone's hard work. And it also makes me think that our summer recovery programs, which were really robust this past summer, hopefully helped close that gap that we are also aware of. Board Member Browning, you may not be able to see, but our court reporter and our attorney have since come in, so we probably need to recess very soon so that we can go into that executive session, and then we will pick up with the 5-year work plan updates after that. So unless any board member has any specific and burning comments, we'll go ahead and ask for public comment.
No, I mean, I'm fine. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Is there any public comment? Seeing none. Again, thank you so much for your dedication and everything that you do. All right. We will go ahead and take a recess at 11 a.m. For 5 minutes, as long as it takes for our court reporter to set up, and then we will move into our attorney-client session. Thank you.